sort of an operation in Mardan to try and deal with this rising spate of problems.
It's still very early days at the moment in terms of this incident, Kamal, but has anybody or will anybody take responsibility for this in relation to previous attacks, or should we just wait and see?
Most of the time when the attacks are carried out against the security forces, a claim of responsibility follows, but we have not heard anything so far. Nobody has so far taken responsibility.
Well, for the moment, Kamal, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on what's going on in Mardan in northwest Pakistan. Well, Egyptians are waking up to a 17th day of protests across the country. The calls for the President, Mubarak, to resign are now spreading out of Liberation Square. Hundreds are camping in front of Parliament and thousands more workers are expected to strike. Negotiations for a swift transition of power are continuing. From Cairo, Ayman Mahdi has more.
Well, the political standoff between President Hosni Mubarak's government and the so-called Committee of the Wise Men continues without any progress, really. The so-called Committee of the Wise Men has put forth their demands, which are also representative of some of the protesters' demands that President Hosni Mubarak step down and transfer power to Vice President Omar Suleiman to begin implementing constitutional reforms. But the president seems to be very much entrenched into holding on to power at least until the end of his term in September. Many feel that is an attempt by the regime to consolidate its grip on power, and many simply feel they are just empty and false promises. They've seen promises about reform made in the past without being substantiated, and they fear this could possibly happen now. For his part, though, the belief is that if the president were to step down for any reason, he would transfer power to the speakers of the Egyptian parliament, and in that case, he would be forced, the speaker of the parliament would be forced to carry out elections in 60 days under the current constitution, and by many people's assessment, the current constitution is rigged in a way that it would favor the ruling National Democratic Party because they would be the only ones allowed to nominate a candidate, and therefore the opposition parties would not be allowed to nominate any presidential candidates. So many are describing that really the ace in the president's back pocket, which is not allowing him to step down, and it's certainly something that is being used to back or push back the demands of the protesters and the opposition, saying it would lead to a bit of political vacuum and chaos without bringing the much-needed reforms that the protesters and other members of Egypt's opposition are demanding. Now, all of this is happening as the protesters continue in Liberation Square, with some of them moving closer to the symbolic heart of Cairo at the Parliament building. There's a sit-in taking place there that is lasting throughout the course of the evening. And all of this against the backdrop of some very interesting developments with Egypt's labor force. Thousands of workers representing different sectors and industry have gone on strike, and it's a momentum that many of the protesters say will add to their cause for President Hosni Mubarak to step down. Whether or not these labor strikes continue to grow in the coming days will be watched very closely because they represent a very important element of Egyptian society and could widen and increase perhaps the pressure against Hosni Mubarak to step down.
Well, the protests are spreading to other parts of Cairo now. Hundreds of pro-democracy demonstrators are camped outside Parliament. It's a sign that protests are entering a new phase, with people taking their message for Mubarak to go straight to the politicians. Gatherings outside parliamentary buildings are usually banned, but in a surprise move, the army is allowing people access. Now, the cabinet formed by President Mubarak in response to the protests is coming under pressure. The newly appointed culture minister, Jabbar Ashfor, has quit. His family say it's due to health reasons, but Egypt's main daily newspaper, Al-Ahram, says Ashfor, who's also a writer, was criticised by his colleagues for taking the post. Ashfor was the only new face in the new cabinet. As Egypt waits for democratic transition, Tunisia, the country where the wave of change began, is still facing criticism from human rights groups. Despite a promise to release all political prisoners, around 1,000 are still in custody. Nazanin Mashiri has more.
The bench sheikhs are waiting for the release of their son. Nour el-Haq is a political prisoner, serving a 3-year sentence. Convicted under Tunisian anti-terror laws for publishing banned materials online, his family say he's innocent and was targeted for his religious beliefs.
It is so unjust. All these kids have done is be good Muslims. Religion here is a crime, Having a beard is a crime. Wearing a veil is a crime.
Najia says her son, the youngest in the family, has been harassed by the secret police since he was 14.
Imagine they put him with criminals. Imagine what I feel when my son used to live in a clean environment and now lives in a horrid place.
Mohammed Abu knows what that's like. He was a political prisoner under Ben Ali, detained for 16 months for writing an article critical of the regime.
Prisoners would be taken out by night in the winter, naked. They were tortured and beaten. They were made to imitate chicken sounds or animals. The aim was to destroy the morale of the prisoners.
Things are different now. Ben Ali is gone. A new caretaker government says it will promote freedom of speech and democracy. But it's not easy reversing years of dictatorship. One of the first promises made by this new interim government was an amnesty for all political prisoners. Some detainees have been released and others escaped in the days following Ben Ali's fall. But the authorities have failed to do anything about those convicted under Tunisia's anti-terrorism laws. The former president, Ben Ali, was an important American ally in their war on terror. But human rights groups say the law was used as an excuse to oppress the opposition.
They were not convicted of committing any terrorist acts or possessing explosives. They were usually convicted for either talking about going to Iraq to join the jihad or talking about going to Somalia. And so, in other words, they were convicted for their intentions and not for their acts.
A new emergency law gives the acting president powers to release all political prisoners. The Ben Sheikhs hope this weekly journey to visit their son in jail will be their last. Nazanin Mashiri, Al Jazeera, Tunis.
The trial of Abu Bakr Bashir, spiritual leader of the Al-Qaeda-linked Jamia Islamiyah network, has been postponed until Monday. Bashir was due in court on Thursday to face terrorism charges. The 72-year-old has already served time for conspiracy over the 2002 Bali bombings. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. Thailand and Cambodia will present their arguments over a border dispute to the United Nations next week. Both countries blame each other for recent damage to an ancient Hindu temple located at the centre of military clashes. At least 11 people have died in the fighting and thousands have fled their homes. The Philippines government has resumed peace talks with Muslim separatists in the country's south. A spokesman for the Moro Islamic Liberation Front says he's optimistic about negotiating an end to a decades-long conflict. But as Margot Ortigas reports, there's dissension within the MILF itself.
Ligawasan Marsh, a resource-rich battlefield. Long an enclave of the separatist Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, it was once difficult to get in without the group's say-so. But not anymore.
1,000 fighters in this one camp used to be affiliated with the MILF. Over the past couple of years, they have jumped ship and joined forces with the Moro National Liberation Front. They say more and more of them are doing so, growing frustrated and disheartened with the MILF leadership.
For these fighters, it's a return to the mother group. The MILF broke away from the Philippines' original Muslim separatist movement, the MNLF, back in the 70s, when a peace deal was first struck with the government. But the MILF's pursuit of its own peace deal has not been as successful. Despite its leader's statements to the contrary, many of the ground troops grew restless.
They say too much, but accomplish nothing.
Now able to visit Ligawasan, the MNLF chairman is welcomed warmly in this former MILF camp. Even if many consider the original peace deal he brokered a failure, he is still seen here as a hero.
I am euphoric about this because I think this is a sign, a signal from the Almighty God that now our people have finally learned a big lesson, namely that only when they are united that they can be free.
Another camp where MILF fighters have turned, believing the group's leaders to be ineffective and detached. Misuwari says that more than half of the MILF's 12,000 troops have now rejoined the MNLF, something the MILF leadership denies.
That's too exaggerated. We were able to sustain the strength on the ground. No problem at all.
Here in the MILF heartland, the finishing touches are being put on what's to be the largest mosque in the country. Construction stalled 3 years ago. Around the same time, MILF peace talks with the government fell through. Site engineers got over their hurdles, but it's back to the drawing board for the MILF. Until the leaders face the discontent of their own ground forces, any deal discussions with the government now will be nothing more than cosmetic. Marga Ortigas, Al Jazeera, Cotabato, Southern Philippines.
Well, it's more than a year away, but already politicians in the United States are looking ahead to the next presidential election. Stay with us to find out whether Sarah Palin is best placed to run for the Republicans. And rescuing migrants who don't need rescuing. Coming up, we'll tell you what has got the Mexican army so embarrassed.
Very cold weather to come across a good part of North America. This wintry plunge is set to persist. We've got snow now making its way away from the central and southern plains. That will sweep its way through quite quickly, actually, as we go on through the course of Thursday. So brighter skies coming in behind, but boy, is it going to be cold. -4, a top temperature for New York, and -12 there for Ottawa. Struggling around freezing for DC, and we're looking at highs of just 9 degrees in Atlanta. About the only warmth I can offer you really is going to be down towards that southeastern corner, 26 there in Miami. Even Dallas will struggle to reach freezing. -2 could be the top temperature here on Thursday then. Some warmth too into the western side of the US, and notice some snow coming into BC, so western parts of Canada still staying very wintry once again. That snow pushing in over the higher ground. Come down into the Caribbean, and there's quite a rash of showers here. Some wetter weather just making its way across the Gulf of Mexico. Not too bad for the Greater Antilles, and even the Lesser Antilles I think should stay largely dry, but down towards the south, Trinidad and Tobago, maybe pushing as far north as Barbados, could see 1 or 2 sharp showers. Showers or longer spells of rain continue to drive their way into that western side of Europe, but on a southwesterly wind, it's mild. Temperatures getting up to around 12 degrees Celsius, but cold on the other side of Europe with Moscow at -13 degrees.